So, Lord Adonis, what do you make of what Tony Blair said today? Essentially, the Labour Party is finished if all it does is continue to pick on these culture wars with the Tories.
Well, what Tony Blair said is plain common sense. Labour normally loses elections. It's only had two leaders who were born in the 120 years of its existence who actually won elections, himself and Howard Wilson. And it's done that by a really strong appeal to the centre ground, uniting both the centre and the left, which means people who naturally think of themselves as Liberal and Tory, as well as people who think of themselves as Labour. Labour's constant problem is that too many people in the centre ground see it as a danger, that it's going to play fast and loose with Britain's security, that it's going to tax too much, that it's not going to cultivate the economy as it should. We saw all of those themes in spades in the general election in December, where Jeremy Corbyn was massacred by Boris Johnson. So I think everything Tony Blair said was straightforward and sensible, and we just got to take heed of it, and then we might be able to win an election.
He specifically was asked and referred to this pledge that Rebecca Long-Bailey has made part of her campaign, a pledge against transphobia in the party, she says. Others say this is an attempt to shut down free speech and debate over trans issues. Tony Blair said today he wouldn't sign this pledge. Where do you stand on it?
Well, I think what Tony was saying is that if you're leader of a party, it's not a good idea to be signing pledges because it makes it look as if your position on issues is being dictated from outside. And the best thing to do, which I know was very much his view when he was Labour Party leader, was to sign no pledges at all. And I support that. I think people expect people who are going to be Prime Minister not to be pledged to in a way that makes it look as if they're subordinating their own independence of movement as far as the public's concerned to a particular interest group. So I think what he was saying wasn't anything to do with the trans issue and everything to do with the fact that as a party leader you shouldn't be going around signing pledges. It's exactly the kind of thing which makes it look as if you're subordinates and not actually in charge.
He also came close to suggesting some type of formal alliance with the Lib Dems. Your verdict on that?
I strongly approve of that. The Labour Party's only won elections when it's either had a formal or informal arrangement with the Lib Dems. And by informal, I mean having similar policies and agreeing in practice that we're not going to fight each other in parliamentary constituencies where we both have a chance of winning. It's very important that my Labour friends understand that the Labour Party only became a national party with members of Parliament because it had a pact with the Liberals. The Gladstone-MacDonald Pact, which was signed between the first leader of the Labour Party, Ramsay MacDonald, and the son of the great Liberal Prime Minister, W.E. Gladstone. That pact actually involved Labour and Liberal candidates standing down in winnable seats for each party, and it was that got the Labour Party into Parliament in large numbers, and which led to the longest period of non-Conservative government that this country has had in the last 150 years.
Problem is, though, the three people who are standing at this election, Lord Adonis, don't seem to be listening to this one bit. They have absolutely zero interest in a pact with the Lib Dems, listening to Tony Blair. In fact, all they want to do is appeal to a Corbynista base, in my opinion. So, who are you backing? Can any of them save Labour?
Well, I'm backing Keir Starmer, who I think would be a good leader.
Is he a centrist just pretending to be left-wing?
Well, I don't think there's a difference between being... I think it's not a centrist and left issue. It's a sensible v non-sensible issue. Are you actually going to take a sensible, pragmatic view on tax and spend, on defending Britain's interests abroad? Can you be trusted to take good decisions and not to be in hock to factional and sectional interests? I look at Keir Starmer and I see somebody who's very much in the mould of Clement Attlee, Howard Wilson, Tony Blair, Gordon Brown, able to take tough decisions, can be trusted, not held ransom by any sectional interest groups. He's
certainly distancing himself from Tony Blair publicly.
Yeah, well, I could understand as he wins the election that he's not wanting to identify himself with any one previous leader. But this guy's been Director of Public Prosecutions, held a really serious and responsible job in public life, and I certainly think he can be trusted with the future of the country.
Okay, fascinating stuff. That is Lord Adonis, Cabinet Minister, of course, under Blair and Brown. Former Mayor of London, Ken Livingstone, joins us now. Ken, I imagine you have quite a different take on Tony Blair's speech today.
Well, I think Tony Blair, he achieved quite a lot, but he made some disastrous mistakes like getting involved in the war in Iraq and so on. But I think his biggest error was not to shift the balance of wealth in our country. I mean, in the last 40 years since Thatcher came to power, almost all the wealth that's created goes to the top 1% of 1%. And it's got even worse in this last 10 years under the Liberal-Tory coalition and now under Boris Johnson. We've only just managed to earn the same amount of money we did, the average person, back in 2008. And yet, what we saw under Labour and Tory governments was billions and billions of pounds being put into propping up the banks. Well, if we can find billions, well, it was over £100 billion to prop up the banks. Why can't we find that money to tackle the poverty and the homelessness that has become worse?
But Tony Blair would say that a Labour on the left simply cannot be elected, so it's much better to have a moderate Labour that has a chance of winning power.
Well, Labour on the left won back in 1945. Biggest majority under Attlee.
I know, but Ken, come on. That's the reality. You've got to go back to 1945. That's the issue, isn't it?
But they won with a radical programme, created full employment, a welfare state, the NHS, and then the Tories, when they came back to power, carried on with those policies. And I think the tragedy is, following Thatcher, we dropped the Keynesian economics that made a fairer economy and a fairer society, not just in Britain, but all around the Western world. And now we've got this neoliberal economics, and it hasn't led to a good, strong economy. And we've got the lowest levels of investment, I think, since the Second World War. We've got a real increase in poverty. People are angry.
But Ken, this was a historic defeat for Jeremy Corbyn in that climate.
Well, you actually look at the media coverage. How can you have a proper functioning democracy when so much of the media is in the hands of right-wing billionaires who are terrified that under Jeremy Corbyn he was going to crack down on all
what about the BBC?
They were doing.
What about the BBC? I mean, they were coming pretty close to campaign for Remain.
The trouble is with the BBC, they tend to just reflect what's predominantly in the newspapers. That sets the story for the day. And I mean, I look back, this idea that the BBC is up a bit on the left is nonsense. I mean, when in my last election up against Boris Johnson, the Tory party privately met with the BBC to say, cancel the debate between Ken and Boris a week before the election, because they thought it might lead to Boris losing because he wasn't doing well in the debates. And the BBC did that. I mean, complete bias. Some just actually give in to the Tories, and then they lied, said they'd just done it because.
But Ken, it's just why Labour keeps losing, the fact they keep on shooting the messenger. But I don't really think that this is about the media. What I'm interested in to know if you think that any of these three leadership contenders can actually take Labour back into power.
I don't have the slightest doubt that Rebecca Long-Bailey and Keir Starmer can both win the next election. Who are
you going to back?
Well, I'm happy to back either of them. I think they're both brilliant.
Do you want to become part of Labour again?
Well, I mean, literally, when I was suspended by the General Secretary back 4 years ago, because you had a mad Labour MP claiming I was a Nazi apologist and claiming I said Hitler was a Zionist. What was appalling about that was that he didn't pick up the phone to ask if I'd actually said any of this stuff. But I'd be happy to go back in and work to get a Labour government elected, yes.
And have you been in touch with any of the campaigns? Are you going to officially endorse?
No, because literally it will just be a distraction. I mean, all the smears about anti-Semitism, which was one of the worst lies in the general election, the idea that the Labour Party is institutionally anti-Semitic. I mean, I've asked all my Jewish friends in the Labour Party, can they ever remember an anti-Semitic incident in the party. None of them can.
Oh,
all you've had is about
screeds of
200
evidence, though, Ken.
members of,
There's screeds of
tweet
evidence that
something.
may not be the people you're speaking to, but there's screeds of evidence. And I mean,
No, there isn't. I mean,
I think one of the big issues for Labour at the last election was the fact that Jeremy Corbyn simply refused to accept the anti-Semitism within the Labour Party, and when the evidence was put right under his nose.
There's an evidence. We've got over 500,000 members. Jeremy appointed a good general secretary. She did a complete investigation of everybody. We found that something like 250 Labour members had basically tweeted something anti-Semitic. They were suspended or expelled. It was dealt with immediately.
And what about trans rights, Ken? I just want to quickly ask you about trans rights as well. Rebecca Long Bailey has put...
I haven't had an operation for transgender.
I know.
I've always been a man.
That would be quite a story. That would be quite a revelation. I know, but what about signing this pledge that Rebecca Long Bailey has put out there, saying that anyone who doesn't believe that a trans man is a man and a trans woman is a woman should be suspended from the party? Tony Blair today says, nope, I wouldn't be signing any pledge like that. Where do you stand?
No, my simple view is anyone who is stirring up hatred against someone who's transgender should be expelled from the party. But there's a lot of debate going on about this.
So you would sign the pledge?
I haven't seen the pledge, and therefore I'm not able to say that. But I think the simple fact is, a lot of people don't fully understand the transgender issue in the way they understand racism, anti-Semitism, and the issues, or just literally the discrimination against women.